بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our lessons on the fiqh of food and drink. Last week we stopped in the discussion of slaughter, and we'll go from the rules of slaughter. So we'll review first what we said. We said that there are 5 conditions or areas to be halal. 5. And this is from review from last week. First, the one slaughtering. Dhabih. Who's the one who's slaughtering? Number 2, the tool that's being used. What is the tool that's being used to slaughter? The ala. What are we using? Number 3, the place of slaughter. So the mahal, where exactly are you slaughtering? 4, the fi'l, the action, how are you slaughtering? And 5thly, the dhikr. And dhikr, remembrance here means tasmiyah. More specifically saying bismillah or not. When do you have to, or for who slaughter has to have tasmiyah? So these 5, we said, are the 5 arenas of discussion for slaughter to be halal. And it means here that these are conditions and there's rules. So today, inshallah, we'll cover all 5 with some clarity, to which then we can use this to help find judgment for certain meats that are slaughtered. Because we always hear, is this halal or not? With these conditions, inshallah, you have that knowledge. So first, we'll go over the one who's slaughtering. We spoke about last week, but to make it clear. So the one who's slaughtering has to have 3 conditions. Yani dhabih, who's the one slaughtering? Number 1, they have to be sane. Aqil, someone who's sane. And so if the person is not sane, then their slaughter is not permissible. And obviously this means children, intoxicated people, and insane people are outside. Because the child doesn't know what they're doing. So they're not obviously going to, even though they have sanity, they don't have the ability to have intention. Or they don't have the understanding of that. The one who's insane, obviously they're not sane. And lastly, the one who is drunk at that moment is rufu' al-qalam. Yani he's marfu' al-qalam. It's as if he's not there. So the ulama agree to this. It has to be sane. And then the next is either a Muslim, which is the primary one. It must be a Muslim. Or lastly, a kitabi, Jew or Christian. And we mentioned this last week already. طيب. So that means 3 things we need. It has to be sane. Muslim is preference, if not a kitabi, Jew or Christian. And we said last week we take from this the slaughter of the Zoroastrians. The ulama, they say the slaughter of the Zoroastrian, the Majus, is not accepted. Likewise, the slaughter of the Mushrik, the polytheist, and all their types. And the ulama, they mention this almost as if it's an agreement, i.e., all those who don't qualify as kitabi. We said there's some differing a little bit on the Zoroastrian, but correct opinion not allowed. Likewise, the one who's kafir, a kafir asli, an original disbeliever who doesn't ascribe to the Judaism or Christianity, their slaughter is not counted because they're not kitabi. Likewise, in today's time, atheist, a communist, and the likes. And this was mentioned by Sheikh Salih Fawzan, Kitab al-At'imah, page 148 to 149. Sheikh mentions what's intended by a mulhid, a dahri, atheist, secular, all these kind of groups. Now somebody may ask the question, but what's the difference between a kafir who's not a kitabi and one who's a kitabi? They both commit kufr. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah has beautiful discussion about that. We don't have much time to read it, but if you go to the Kitab al-At'imah of Sheikh Fawzan, he mentions it beautifully. Ibn Qayyim explained why Ahlul Kitab slaughter is allowed, even though they commit shirk. And the other ones who are not. It's a very nice explanation. So from this, we have 3 things then. The one who's slaughtering must be sane, a Muslim, or a kitabi. With this being said, people always ask the question, what does it mean kitabi? If the person slaughtering is a Jew or Christian, how much do they have to be practicing? What if they're just a typical Christian? They don't go to church. They don't practice anything. Most people ask this question. We say today, these are not Jews or Christians. Okay, some people make this claim, but the Ahlul Ilm, the ulama, The strongest view according to them, anyone who ascribes to a religion, فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ, he's from them. Irrespective if they go to church or the synagogue or not. Irrespective if they believe in their aqidah or not. Because they're all in the kufr, first of all. And all of them have varying degrees, but the Salaf didn't differentiate. Some of them did. For example, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he held the view that a certain group of Christians, Arab, were not considered Christians because they don't practice the faith, except for drinking khamr, that's all they do. Like a majority of the ulama and the Sahaba, the way they understood, whoever says they're Jew or Christian, it doesn't matter if they're practicing or not practicing. Some Ahlul Ilm went so far to say that their parents have to be Jew and Christian, otherwise they're not Kitabi. Some they said other things. But the final conclusion, the most correct opinion, if someone ascribes to this religion, this irrespective of what they do, i.e. if they practice, they don't practice, or what they believe, it's permissible. And this is the view of a few of the companions, as I'll mention, and the view of the Ahnaf and the Malikiyyah, and also the chosen opinion of Imam al-Tabari, and Shaykh Salih Fawzan, likewise, in Kitab al-Ta'imah, page 105 to 107. So Imam al-Tabari, he mentions in his tafsir, after he mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, about the Jews and Christians and their meat, he has a long discussion about those who say that, particularly the view of Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and he explains, after he mentions the different reasons why it's not correct to exclude certain groups from the Jews and Christians, because at the end of the day he concludes that وَالرَّاجِحْ مِنْ قَوْلَيْنِ, what's more correct from these two opinions is that the slaughter of one who's a Christian, it still counts as being a Christian because they are from them, irrespective if they are lenient or they are easygoing with some of the obligations, some of the prohibitions which are necessary amongst them or from them for their religion. And so we'll mention some of the Sahaba who held that view, because this question comes a lot. People say, well, this is not a real question. As if Allah didn't say the Jews and Christians already are committing shirk and they're not practicing the teachings of Musa and Isa, alayhi salam. So this is important, because if you go to that point and you say, okay, they're not practicing, what does it mean practicing Jew and Christian? So the ulama, they made it easy for us here. Example, Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, it's narrated that a man came to him and asked about a group of Jews who read the Torah, but they also establish the Sabbath, but they don't believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah, the resurrection. He said they are a group from the people of the book. And this is reported by Abdul in his Musannaf and also al-Bayhaqi, and the Isnad is Sahih. It's very important. Many of them you'll find till today, some of them don't believe in Qiyamah. It's important. This is if you really go into their religion. But this is Umar, he said, he's one of them. If we're from them, doesn't matter. And that's a pinnacle part of our faith, because Ibn al-Qayyim mentions one of the difference between the slaughter of the regular kitabi versus the kafir is the fact they believe in these things. But Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu understood that it doesn't matter. Ibn Abbas likewise, he said, eat from the slaughtering of the group called Bani Taghlib. Alright, so this is the group, Taghlib. This is the group in question. And even you can marry their women. And Ibn Abbas held this view because he understood that they're still Christians even if they don't practice. Imam al-Zuhri, rahimahullah, was asked about the slaughtering of the Arab Christians. He said, whoever embraces a religion is considered one of them or from its people. Also the Musannaf Abdul Razak is Isnad Sahih. So this helps us to see that the Sahaba, they made easy this understanding. Otherwise, it would be impossible to find the meat of a kitabi, because in the end, which one of them is truly practicing, it would be beyond us to understand or to find that answer. But on top of this, the ulama, they've said this because the conditions to say that they have to be practicing are not with evidence, but it's only from understanding of the verse. So inshallah, this will make it easier to understand later on when we talk about the meat of Ahlul Kitab. Number 2, which is the tool of slaughter. So now that we know who can slaughter, what's the tool that needs to be used? The ulama, they mentioned majority. Any tool that's sharp and allows the blood to flow is permissible to use except for 2. It cannot be a tooth or a nail. And some scholars add a third, or a bone. So any tool, it's sharp and allows the blood to flow, it's permissible to use to slaughter, provided it's not a tooth or a nail and a bone. 3 things. And the reason why they exempted those is based on this text I'm going to read. But any sharp item that allows the blood to flow. ودليل حديث رافع بن خديج رضي الله تعالى عنه, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, eat what is slaughtered with any instrument that makes the blood flow, except what is slaughtered with a tooth or a nail. And some of the scholars understood the tooth or a nail as a tooth or a nail. Another version says a bone. And this was the view of many scholars, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Hassan bin Salih, Al-Layth bin Sa'id, Imam Shafi'i, Ahmed, and others. If you go to Al-Mughni and Mujmu' of Imam Nawawi, likewise, you'll find this. Why are these exempted? The tooth and the nail and the bone. The ulama, when they look at the hadith, they explain that one of the two reasons. Number one, Imam Nawawi says, one of the reasons is because the bone is impure. And they derive this concept from the fact that when you use the washroom, you shouldn't use the bone. So they said from there, if it's not allowed to use it to purify yourself when you're using the washroom, then they extended it here. This is one understanding. So if it's impure and you cut an animal with it, you're going to make it impure, i.e. the blood is going to become splitting from impurity. Second thing he said, rahimahullah, was it will spoil the slaughter, and also tooth is the tool used by the Abyssinians, the Habasha. And at that time they were Christians. And that's exactly what Rasul ﷺ, he intended that time, because they slaughtered using a nail. And so Imam al-Qurtubi and Mufhim, he says how they used to do it. They would take a sharp nail and they would stab the neck of the animal, and essentially it's not sharp enough to cut, like really slaughter, so they'll keep doing that till it's punctured to death, which would fall into one of the categories of prohibition. Some of the ulama, they mention a more simple explanation. Like Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, in one of his books on prohibitions, he says, it's because it's not sharp. These two are not sharp items. And in Islam, you have to use a sharp item, because the blood has to flow, and also shows us that it's not appropriate because it's not befitting to slaughter with dull tools. This is a fact that we take that in Islam, the animal welfare is very important. And we're going to get to that in a minute, because some people assume that Islamic slaughter is not considered ethical or humane. And we say that Islam prohibited things which are dangerous to the animal, or they're not suitable for slaughter to begin with. And because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says clearly, "Ma anhar ad-dam," whatever lets the blood flow, and therefore it should be something which is sharp. There's an hadith in Abu Dawood, it's an authentic hadith. A woman came to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said that she slaughtered an animal with a sharp piece of wood. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it's permissible to eat. So it doesn't have to be a knife. It doesn't have to be a knife. For example, Imam Nawawi in Sharh Sahih Muslim, when he explains the hadith, he says, in this hadith is clarity in the permissibility of slaughtering with any sharp object that cuts except for the bone or tooth and all other bones. And he gives examples such as a sword, a knife, spears, rock, wood, glass, sugar cane, ceramic, brass, and anything else. And the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because people now ask the question, machine slaughter. Is machine slaughter halal or not? Well, the hadith answers that question for us. Ma anhar ad-dam, whatever allows the blood to flow. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whatever allows the blood to flow, وَذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ, and Allah's name is mentioned, or وَذَكَرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ, and you mention Allah's name, فَكُلْ, then eat it. And so here the hadith tells us whatever allows the blood to flow, and that's general, because the ma here is for generality. It doesn't say specifically. Because many people assume that when it comes to slaughtering, it has to be hand slaughter. What does the hand slaughter versus machine slaughter mean? This is the point they're differing over. What they're differing over is the tool you're using and the hand, because when you're slaughtering with other things, they say that the first problem is when you're slaughtering with the machine, the tasmiyah is not going to be made because the hadith says and Allah's name is mentioned. And the second thing is you have to cut with your hand to ensure that the blood is being flown using a knife. So they said you use a knife and use the hand and you say the name of Allah. But in reality, if the name of Allah is pronounced and something else is used to slaughter it, then you cannot say it's haram. And that's why our scholars did not say machine slaughter is haram. Did not say that. And I believe if you look carefully at the different madhahib who hold the view it's permissible, the only madhab is missing here is the ahnaf. So you can understand that certain madhabs have more strict conditions of slaughter versus others. That's why sometimes they will say it's halal one group versus another. And it's important to understand the difference, because some brothers and sisters, they don't understand and they just think it's haram, and everyone holds that view. There's different views. So if you study, you'll see, but at least you understand, okay, they have a different view from a different group of scholars. One hadith comes, one version of this hadith above, which Shaykh Al-Albani authenticates in Sahih Al-Jami', hadith number 2519, ما أنهر الدم بما شئت واذكر اسم الله عليه. Let the blood flow with whatever you wish, and mention Allah's name over it. From here, the permanent committee was asked, there's a company that intends to buy an automatic slaughtering machine instead of doing the job manually, because there are too many animals to slaughter. And this is exactly why machine slaughter is so popular. We all want to eat the chicken, but then we all want it hand slaughtered. So the mushkil now is, how can we have both? So the permanent committee said it's permissible for you to buy the automated machine to slaughter edible animals. Another fatwa, likewise, they mention the same thing. They say, secondly, using machines for slaughtering animals whose flesh is permissible to eat according to Sharia does not differ from slaughtering with them using a knife. Hence, whosoever presses the button by whatever means and mentions the name of Allah alone, it is halal to eat their slaughtered animals, be they Muslims, Jews, or Christians. And this is because any animal whose blood is caused to flow and Allah's name is mentioned, over it is halal to eat except what is slaughtered using a tooth or nails. May Allah grant us success until the end of the fatwa. So this is important to understand. So when we hear the controversies now, certain brand is haram or certain meat is haram, now we know where the difference is. It goes back to this discussion. Because some people become hysterical and they change their view all the time. Halal, this is haram, and they don't know. All they hear is someone told you it's haram. The newspaper said it's halal now. Someone else said it's haram. So as Muslims should study this. Because as Muslims we should know our deen. So inshallah it becomes clear then that it's permissible to use machine slaughter. And there's no prohibition, provided that the name of Allah is mentioned and the blood is flowing, as the hadith they teach us. The third then condition is the place of slaughter. And this is something which many of us need to understand. The ulama agree that when it comes to slaughter, it has to be at the throat of the animal. And for the camel, we said it could be lower because it has a special part of the body where the blood can flow from it. i.e., Allah made it easier for us for the camel. And this is by ijma' ulama. It has to be slaughtered at the throat region or what is between the neck and the shoulder. Ibn Qudam mentioned al-ijma'. So what are those places? 4 places. The ulama said 4 places have to be, or in consideration of being cut. Number 1, the throat. Number 2, the esophagus. And number 3 and 4, the 2 jugular veins. And some ulama say, 50, the blood has to come out when it's done. It's flowing. So based on these 4, the throat, and the esophagus, so literally the windpipe, and the 2 jugular veins. And obviously when you cut those places or something around that, the blood will flow. Now the ulama, they discussed this issue, and they differed. Do you have to cut all 4 places, or 2 of the places, or 3 of them? And this shows you again that pronouncing meat to be haram, halal, goes back to opinions of fiqh. If you understand these masala, you can understand which position, first of all, you want to hold after you study it, but also why someone will say it's haram and understand it. You have to be more accepting and understanding. So some of the scholars said, it doesn't matter which of the 4 is cut as long as the blood is flowing. This is a view Imam al-Shawkani in Sayyid al-Jarar. He says if the blood is flowing, it doesn't matter if you cut all 3 or all 4 or 2 or as long as it's flowing. Because the hadith says, whatever makes the blood flow. Shaykh Salih Fawzan, his tarjih is all 3 areas. So the esophagus and the 2 jugular veins, or at least the throat and 2 jugular veins. And many scholars held that view, 3 areas. But Shaykh Uthaymeen, he held the view just the 2 jugular veins, because they're the parts where the blood come. So different goes on here, we see that the scholars, they made it easier for us. That they differed, so that someone, if they hold one of those views. But really, when you slaughter the animal, if the blood is flowing, some of those are being cut. That's the key. Something has to be cut. And obviously, the scholars, the reason why they get into this is to ensure that it's slaughtered. That was the key, to ensure that it's flowing. Because there's different types of cuts. Even now, if in the industry, there's something called a vertical cut, where they don't cut it horizontally, they cut it vertically. Allahu musta'an. So stuff like this exists, so this helps us to see So depending on the view someone holds here, you could say some slaughter is haram or halal maybe. If you hold that view, it has to be 3 out of the 4 or 4 out of 4 or like this. But in reality, the ulama, they make it a little bit easier, provided the blood is flowing and at least 3 or 2 out of 4, some of them say. And most of the times we won't know. Allah Ta'ala a'lam, we wouldn't really know because it would come to animals were slaughtered. When they slaughtered, that region is cut and whatever is cut is cut. Then the ulama went so far as to say, what about if the back of the head is cut? You start from the back to the front, from the neck, because the animals start cut from the throat. Majority said it's permissible. The majority says it's permissible because as long as you cut those 4. I mean, it's not a common, but if it's the case, someone cut from the back of the neck all the way through. Obviously, it's not recommended either because it's unnecessary cutting, right? You cut from the throat is the better. But that shows you that there's some type of leniency there. Then they get into another discussion regarding the place, which is to do with when you're cutting, you have to ensure the knife is sharp. Because in order to allow these places to be cut, the knife must be very sharp. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ الْإِحْسَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Allah has recorded or decreed ihsan, perfection in all things. And at the end the hadith says when you're slaughtering, make good your slaughter. Sharpen the knife. This is very important. Jews and Muslims agree to this. It's a very sharp knife. But Islam takes a step further. The ulama say slaughtering the animal with a dull knife is not befitting and not appropriate. It's disliked because it's a naw' min al-ta'dhib, type of torment of the animal. Again, animal welfare in Islam, because we're not allowed just to slaughter it. If that was the case, then the bone and the tooth would have been permitted. We said they're not sharp enough. One view. On top of that, Islam has also come to prevent animals from being tortured unnecessarily. Psychological torture, you're not allowed to slaughter an animal in the presence of other animals. This is very important. Because we're going to get into the next one, the fi'l. In today's time, as we mentioned last week, many nations are questioning the halal meat. And some of the things they mention is the humanity of the animal slaughter, Islamic slaughter. We say, no, Islam has come with animal rights. And this is one point we have to understand. Muslims today, when we're underneath the microscope, we have to stand firm. We have ilm in our religion. So if they were to say, well, how ethical is Islamic slaughter? How humane? We say it's very humane. The knife has to be extremely sharp. Number 2 is disliked to slaughter with a dull knife because the type of torment and unnecessary torment. Thirdly, you can't slaughter an animal in front of the animal. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once he saw someone sharpening the knife when the animal was watching. He said, "Turid an tumitaha motan." You wanted to kill it twice, right? Motat, and twice, or in front of it, you're watching you cut it, sharpening it, which means that you have to sharpen it behind its back, away from it. And this also shows you we're not allowed to punish it psychologically. What about then physically? Hadith Sahih, fi Sahih Musnad. Another hadith, it mentions Umar ibn Khattab saw a man, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, dragging the animal, and he has the knife in front of it. He said, "What? Can you not have done it before?" He said. Right? Because now the animal clearly sees, it's already dying within. And so this is important to mention these points, because when someone raises these points, Islamic slaughter versus humane, we say, well, on which grounds are we talking here? We have clear evidences. So if something happens on the ground in our slaughterhouses, that doesn't mean that's what Islam teaches. Differentiate between the two. Fourthly, the fi'l, the action itself. So when it comes to slaughtering the animal, it must be done, as we said, with a sharp knife, cutting the 4 areas, or depending on the view, the whole 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4, in a swift movement. A swift movement must be done swiftly. And the knife, if it's sharp enough and done with someone who's skilled, the animal will not feel it and the blood will flow instantaneously and it will bleed out to death. This is the Islamic way of slaughter. So we're not allowed to beat it, to step on it, to traumatize it, or any of this, electrocute it, all of these things. Lakin now people raise the question, what about stunning the animal? This is the one that most people they have questions about. And just this week, I believe France is slated to make haram or to ban halal meat in France. Just this week, before Ramadan, they announced this. There were plans to ban halal meat. So they're another country amongst the 20-odd countries in Europe who ban halal meat. So the question now is back on the table again. Why are they doing this? And the question is that they're not banning halal meat. They're banning all non-stunned animals slaughter. Religious slaughter, which is unstunned. Jews and Muslims are included in this ban. And it's not something new. They're following Austria and Belgium and others. So when people hear the headlines, what they think is they're banning halal meat, even though there's evidence that they were discussing it by name. But what they were actually focusing on is a stun. They say you have to stun the animal because it's more humane, and then you slaughter. And last week we spoke about what experts said about that. So the question now is it halal to stun the animal or not? Many Muslims, unfortunately, what's happening is we're not addressing the issue, we're running around it. The answer is yes, it's halal to stun an animal, provided the animal is not dead when you stun it. And this also includes for chickens, running it through electric water. And our scholars of Sunnah Jama'ah permit this. And we'll mention 3 of the fatwa. 4 of the fatwa. And it's important to know this, because those who are making maybe the confusion are the ones who don't believe it's halal, and maybe they have a minority view. Like we asked them, which scholar of yours said, or our scholar said it's haram to stun? If that's the issue, Islam is not against it. The issue is, why are they not allowing without it? That's where they're trying to pressure. They're trying to pressure the Muslims. And so truth be told, if Islamically, if it's done the right way, even if you stun the animal and then you slaughter it properly, it's halal. But is it a must for us to stun? Scholars are against it or say it's disliked just by itself, because as we said, it's just like the down life. It's disliked to be harming animal before slaughter. So we have to understand this mawdu'. Some Muslims say stun is haram. We asked them which Ahlul Ilm who said this, and we'll mention some examples. Number 1, Shaykhana Muqbil rahimahullah. Shaykh Muqbil, when he came to America, I believe this is a question from America, if I remember correctly. If not, I will double check. But the question was asking him, there's a type of slaughtering using stun guns, electric bullets. So I think it's the captive bullets, I believe it's called. Those who are slaughtering use it on a cow, then they slaughter it. Is it allowed? The Shaykh rahimahullah said, if the cow falls so that they are capable of slaughtering, there is no harm in this, inshaAllah. Tuhfat al-Mujib, page number 60. So that's Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah, that's one. And some of these fatwa are on Toronto Da'wah, I think. Number 2, the Permanent Committee, Lajna to Da'ima, volume 22 of their Majmu' Fatawa, or Fatawa Lajna to Da'ima, page 366. So they asked a question about a Muslim country using electric tools or devices to hit the animal so that they can have authority over it. They can overpower it and then put it on the ground and slaughter. In other words, what we do today with the stunning. They said if it's possible for the butcher to slaughter the animal immediately after doing this, using this electric device to knock it to the ground, then slaughter it, while it's still alive, then it's permissible, and akluha, jaiz akluha, it's halal to eat it. Jaiz akluha, it's halal to eat it. And if it's the case that when they're slaughtering it's dead, then it's not permissible in that situation. So the question then is that it's allowed to do it provided the animal is alive, and the way that this system works is that stunning has a percentage, where high percentage is alive and some small amounts where it's not. So obviously that's why the Muslims are concerned, because some could be dead. It's a potential. And that's why in some slaughterhouses they lower the voltage, or they don't use the bullets or the gun for the bigger animals, but for the chicken they lower the voltage. The point is, there's room around this. But the ulama are saying this because the conditions can still be met until the end of their fatwa. So that's the Permanent Committee. Sheikh Abdul al-Badr, hafidhullah, he was asked in his explanation of Sunan Ibn Majah, tape number 292. The questioner says, we are from Britain. So it's important, because some people say they're talking about Dar al-Islam. No, I'll bring another one from America, inshallah, because this is important, from our countries. They said, we're from Britain, and we have with us slaughtered chickens that is electrocuted by way of water. So what happens is they have like a tub where it has a voltage, and they run the chicken through it becomes stunned, then defeather it, then they slaughter it. And they said then the chicken becomes stunned and then it's slaughtered. Is this allowed to eat? And the Shaykh says, hafidhullah, if it does not die by the stunning, if it does not die by the stunning, if it is dead, becomes dead meat, and if it's simply stunning the animal while it's still alive, then there's no harm in that, as long as it does not die and it is only stunned. If the stunning causes death, then it is not allowed, because that is dead meat until the end of the fatwa. And the reason why they use the stunning, they said to, according to their logic, is that it will allow the heart to beat, but the mind is unconscious. So then it doesn't feel the next part. So that's chicken as well. Another one, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen. And this is taken from his kitab Liqa'at wal Fatawa al-Aqalliyat al-Muslimat. This is a very recent book about questions about my Muslim minorities. A very, very good book. They ask some questions about things like we're living with today. So one of the questions that comes here, this book, page number 286. They said that the way of slaughter of cows indahum, with the people, or in most of the slaughterhouses, is that they hit it with a gun, a stun gun, until the animal becomes stabilized or they have the ability to have power over it. And it is not dead by this hitting. Then they slaughter it directly after. And the animal doesn't die before slaughter. Is it halal to eat such a animal? The Shaykh says, if it is still alive while it's slaughtered, فهو حلال. لقول الله تعالى والمنخنقة والموقودة والمتردية والنطيحة وما أكل السبع إنما ذكيت. Because in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 3, Allah prohibited these types of slaughter. Hitting animal, sudden blow, strangling it, etc., etc. Then the Shaykh says further, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَاتَ قَبْلِ. If it died before the slaughter, then it's haram. And the way that it works now, when this animal is slaughtered or stunned, it has 8 to 10 minutes before the slaughter is done. And anyone's a professional slaughter, that's more than enough time. Right? Obviously, if someone's not professional, they will not be doing this in the first place. 8 to 10 minutes after. The animal's typically alive. Then the Shaykh says, and there's a dabit. Now this is very important. He gives now a condition or rule. How do you know the animal's halal after, or was dead before or not? Look, the Shaykh is giving us this rule. He says, if the blood spills or flows out the animal, and it's blood that's red and hot, and it's warm, then that means the animal was, even if it doesn't move, its body, after the slaughter, then that means the animal was alive before slaughter. But if the blood is dark or black, then that means the animal died before you slaughtered it. This is a principle. This is very important because today someone says the percentage. The Shaykh is giving a dhabit. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's the reality we're living with. And this fatwa shows you again the difference between Ahlul Ilm and sometimes our own personal views. Maybe our views is that we shouldn't do it, which is, again, we agree. The Islamic way, you don't need to. But he's saying if the case is slaughtered animals today, the dispute is about stunning, then Islam permits the stunning provided the animal is not dead. And what this shows is that the prohibitions of allowing people to slaughter animals without stunning, this in reality is religiously motivated. This is the problem. They want to make difficult our deen, but alhamdulillah, Islamically the action is permissible, even though the ulama still say dislike because there's a type of pain in there the animal faces. But this is important information to know because many Muslims really say stunning is haram, that's it. And the animal is stunned. And they don't know what do they mean by this. Another point now is the fifth point, the last point, which is the animal, the tasmiyah, the saying Bismillah. So that's number 5 of our 5, and inshallah we'll finish with this one. The ulama, they mentioned that when it comes to Muslim slaughtering, they must say the name of Allah. And this now becomes contention because the scholars differ. What if the person forgot? Some of them they have different views, at least 4 different opinions, or 3 different opinions. But the idea is a Muslim should slaughter with the name of Allah, as Allah says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يَذْكُرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ. Do not eat that which Allah's name has been pronounced upon, because it is fisq, it is wickedness or evil. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whatever allows the blood to flow, and Allah's name is mentioned, to eat it. So the question now, if a Muslim slaughtered and forgot, one group of scholars said it's okay because they're Muslims, so they forgot and it's still permissible. But some ulama hold that it's not allowed mutlaqan. If they forgot Basmala, the Muslim is free of sin, but the meat is still haram, even a Muslim. And actually many scholars actually hold that view. And the reason why they hold that view is because the ayah says you cannot eat that which the name of Allah is not pronounced. It's a tough view. But Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, he held the view, the second opinion, and this is the chosen opinion of Imam al-Bukhari, Ibn Abbas, that if the person forgot, then it's okay because they were a Muslim, but they should have done it. And some group of scholars say it's only recommended, not wajib, but that's the weaker of the views. So the correct view, you have to say it. The debate only is, if I forgot it, is it still halal or not? Which is very difficult because we can't count maybe how many times maybe it was forgot or someone ignored it. But then the question now falls to the last group, which is Ahl Kitab. Do they have to say the tasmiyah or not? The ulama here have also broken into groups. One group of scholars, which is the majority, said it's not permissible until they say the name of Allah. And that's very clear from the verse, because they say, وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ, whatever is slaughtered for other than Allah, and they didn't say Allah's name. It means if they say the name other than Allah, clearly it's haram. But if they don't say it, they still didn't slaughter it the right way, because the ayah says you have to eat on that which Allah's name is mentioned. Another group of scholars have said, no, it's not must for the Ahl Kitab, because they don't say Allah's name anyways. Generally speaking, they just slaughter. And they said that when Allah made their food halal for us, He didn't say they have to say tasmiyah. وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ, and the food of the people of the book is permissible for you. This verse is Madani, and the verse about you saying Allah's name is Makki, they say. So Imam al-Sha'bi, I believe it was the one who said, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. He says, your Lord doesn't forget. So if Allah said it's permissible, then it means you don't need it. Which because ghaliban, they don't say it. Because now we'll assume that the Jew or Christian saying Allah's name on the slaughter, which is very good if they did, but this is the hard part. But the ulama, they have a point who's haram, because they say that the verse is clear. Now there's a problem. What if you don't know? Because even if I held the view that they don't have to say it, that means you can eat any of them. But those who say that they have to say it, what do you do if you don't know? Someone gives you, a Jew or Christian gives you meat, or you find it in the market. The ulama, they agree, Jumhur ulama, this is a fa'idah, that if you don't know if they say Allah's name or not, Ahl Kitab, huwa halal. It's still halal. By the hadith Aisha radiallahu anha, they brought Rasulullah the meat of a people who, they said, we don't know when they slaughtered it, before they accepted Islam or after. He alayhi salatu wasalam said, pronounce Allah's name over and eat it. This is hadith Bukhari. And this is, you can find more in Kitab al-Mughni and al-Majmu' and others. Why is that important to have? Because most cases we don't know what happened when the meat reaches us. We don't know. So people, what happens is they're disputing things with the Jumhur ulama says, okay. And now we're going to finish with a qa'idah, a rule. Al-aslu, we said, fil hayawan, the origin of animals is hil, permissibility, in terms of eating them. Wa aslu fil dhaba'ih, the origin when it comes to slaughter animals, is haram. But what does that principle mean? This is what people, the ulama explain it. Al-asl, for the hayawan, the asl is halal, we said. You find an animal, you don't know what it is. If it doesn't fit into the categories of haram, even if we don't know, it's still halal, until otherwise proven. But the origin of meat is haram, which means if someone brought you meat today, or you just found meat, let's say on the path, the asl is haram because we don't know if it's dead meat or if it's slaughtered meat. That's why they say it. But what if the person who gave it to you is it's allowed to eat their meat, but then I don't know who gave it to me, if they did the right thing or not. See, there's a different issue. Ibn Uthaymeen explains it two ways. He says you have to differentiate. If you found meat on the floor somewhere, it's haram. We don't know. But let's say somebody who's a Jew or Christian, a Muslim, says, here's some meat. Is it halal to eat the slaughter of a Muslim? Yes. Is it halal to eat the slaughter of a Kitabi? Yes. But I don't know what they did. Did they do tasmiyah? Did they stun it to death, to execute? He says it's still halal. Ibn Uthaymeen says, why? Hadith Aisha here. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Hadith Bukhari, a Muslim, when the Jewish woman gave him the poisoned piece of meat, he ate it. He didn't ask how they slaughtered it. He didn't ask where they got it. It was important. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I fear Allah more than any one of you. He didn't do all of those things because he understood that Ahl Kitab aslan is permissible. It's very different than if you just found meat and you don't know who slaughtered it, where it came from. So it's very clear at this point. You have to be clear because, and we'll talk about this more next week, more about the Ahl Kitab issue, just so we can go through with these five and to come to see the ulama, their two views. The scholars, when it comes to the Ahl Kitab of today's time, are of two opinions. One group says permissible, one group says permissible, and it's based on these five conditions we just studied today. So if you understood the five, then we can understand then the scholars who held this view versus that view, and also some modern contentions that are arisen. Some people may say things, and inshallah we'll mention some of the explanation. But the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is that we have to know where the discussion is. Where is the niza' between the ulama? It's not, as some people think, Ahl Kitab is haram. No one said this. What they mean is today's time. Or somebody will say, we don't know if to say Bismillah. If you don't know, the asl is halal. What do you mean is if you know, then it's haram. See, so we're debating the wrong things and we're coming to telling people all kind of things. And the worst thing is, it's not that if you have a particular view. The worst thing, we're miseducating people. And this is very dangerous because we said before, we're telling people haram, halal and haram, and you don't even know what you're talking about. That's very dangerous. A Muslim should never be like that. They should know what they're talking about. And at the very least, you tell the person what your opinion is, and everyone should respect one another. But we shouldn't be talking about something and we don't know, and then what happens is, we judge Muslims then. Because you may find someone who differs with you, and what do you do then? He says, Astaghfirullah, I thought he was righteous, but he's eating this or he's doing that. And we have this in our community, unfortunately. Somebody sees someone who they say is mashallah, but he ate this particular thing, and they don't even know what the ruling is, but just because this is where we are. But what a Muslim should be more conscious, say perhaps that person doesn't know, number one, or maybe they have a different view. So you do your homework, check, and inshallah Allah will give us tawfiq. And this is important to have this kind of patience and hilm and forbearance, because at the end of the day, as Muslims, we're not supposed to divide one another, we're supposed to unify one another. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from that which we heard. Anyone has any question, inshallah, we will take. Yes.
With regards to the machine slaughter versus the hand slaughter, is it correct to go for one, for example, like say you're at the grocery store and you see two different brands and one is machine slaughtered and one says that it's slaughtered by hand. Should you go for the one that's slaughtered by hand, or is it okay to just...
So the brother's asking, if you're in this grocery store and you have two options, one meat says machine slaughtered, other hand slaughtered, is it better to go for one over the other? At the end, if we say both are halal, it's your choice. But you see, the thing is what's closer, what's safer, no one differs in the hand. Right? So if someone was scared, for example, I'm still not clear on it, to go with the hand slaughter, it's always safer, right, for you. But if you studied it, you understand both are halal. Maybe someone will check the price, maybe, depends, maybe. Wallahu alam, but somebody would look into it. But you cannot... Well, the problem is I think some people don't know about the machine slaughter opinion. So what they've been told is only one side, and so they think the other is haram. But once you understand it, it makes it easier. And alhamdulillah, it's sometimes labeled, so you have the choice. But of course, if somebody wants clarity, pick that which is no khilaf. Khuruj min khilaf awla, always. If any khilaf is there, khuruj minha is better. Always, that's safer. But if you know the issue, you do what's easier for you. Wallahu a'lam. Another question, yes? So this is a good question. If we're giving it to them, we don't have to ask. Shaykh Uthaymeen held the view from the action of Rasulullah. But now, what if they are going to them? So maybe next week, inshallah, we'll talk about that, because we're going to talk more about Ahl Kitab next week about these issues surrounding. So maybe we'll talk about that. If we're going to them, should we ask about what they do? Inshallah, maybe next week, that's one, yes.
So, in regards to the foundation of slaughter is haram, that means like if you find meat or a slaughtered animal, then the foundation, the asl would be that it's
haram. If you find meat and you don't know if it's slaughtered or dead, it's haram. But if it comes from someone whose meat is halal, فهو halal. See, it's different. So people, they misunderstood and said, the ulama are saying the qa'idah is agreed upon. This is what there is intended. So at the end, because at the end, then they say you have to look at what's more likely. So inshallah, next week we'll also look at some of the examples as to how the application was with the Sahaba and the Salaf regarding that. Yes.
What about the discussion that back we have recordings of the
So this is a good question. What about now we have these recordings, usually from some sources which are not reliable, or maybe themselves are against animal slaughter. So we say, al-ibratu bi ghalib laysa bi nawadir. The qa'idah teaches that the majority or ruling is based on the majority case, not by the rarities. So if you brought me some 2-3 recordings of an animal being abused to death, and the website says they don't do that, how can we go with that which they say they do, and even was not reported? Generally, because the rules are, even in Canada, they have rules of slaughter. FDA, same. That's the way the slaughterhouse operates. If someone does against it, that's a rarity. So what's happening, we take the rarity as a qa'idah. That's wrong. And unfortunately, what we're doing now is the Muslims are trying to, what they're trying to do is, we'll talk about next week, trying to use some of the examples, but it's not a rule, clearly. But next week, inshallah, we'll address that a little more. Naam.
Franchises, like, are they considered to be under kitab? A franchise that is purchased?
So this is a good question. What about franchises, just the companies, which are typically not religious? Are they considered Ahl Kitab? So we have to go back to the people slaughtering in the actual slaughterhouses versus the franchise itself, because the franchise could just is organization, not religious. So we'll talk about next week, when do you know a particular place is Ahl Kitab or not? When does that ruling apply according to the ulama? Inshallah, because there's a rule to deal with that and how you make that assessment. So next week, inshallah, we'll finish on that topic. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.